To the outside world, David Cross had it all. As a star quarterback in the National Football League, he was one of the most celebrated athletes of his generation. He had the fame, the fortune, and the kind of life most people could only dream about. But above all, David cherished his family. His wife, Olivia, and their 6-year-old daughter, Ella, were his anchor. Olivia was radiant, the picture of grace and charm. She had stood by David's side through his meteoric rise, always the supportive partner who handled the pressures of being in the spotlight with ease. Together, they were the perfect couple, at least on the surface. But recently, something had changed. David began noticing subtle shifts in Olivia's behavior. She had grown distant, her attention often elsewhere even when they were together. She spent hours on her phone, her laughter reserved for private messages she wouldn't share. Late nights out, vague excuses, and an increasing number of solo errands began to chip away at David's peace of mind. At first, he ignored it. Football consumed his time and energy, and he chalked up Olivia's behavior to the natural strain of their high-profile lifestyle. But deep down, a nagging feeling told him something wasn't right. One evening after practice, David sat in his car, staring at his phone. He had texted Olivia an hour earlier to let her know he'd be home early, but she hadn't replied. He tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. When he finally arrived home, the house was dark and quiet. Olivia wasn't there. Ella was at a sleepover with friends, and Olivia had mentioned earlier that she might meet her friend Taylor for drinks. But something about the silence in the house unsettled him. As he walked into the kitchen to grab a water bottle, he noticed something unusual on the counter, a receipt from an upscale restaurant downtown. The date was from the night before, and the bill was for two. David frowned. He hadn't been out to eat with Olivia that night, he'd been watching game footage late into the evening. She'd told him she was visiting her sister. His stomach tightened. When Olivia returned home later that night, she was cheerful and chatty, talking about her night out with Taylor. David didn't mention the receipt. He wanted to believe her, but his instincts told him otherwise. David's head coach, Greg Walsh, had been more than just a mentor. Greg was a father figure, a man who had seen David through injuries, tough losses, and career highs. Greg had also been married for 25 years and was someone David respected deeply. During a private conversation after practice the next day, Greg noticed David's distracted demeanor. "You're not all here today, kid," Greg said, leaning back in his chair. "What's going on?" David hesitated, unsure if he should share something so personal. But the weight of his suspicions was becoming too much to bear. "It's Olivia," David said finally. "I don't know, coach. She's been acting different. Distant. I keep trying to tell myself I'm imagining it, but I found something last night that doesn't add up." Greg studied him for a moment before nodding. "You've got to trust your instincts, David. If something feels off, it probably is. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" David sighed. "I don't even know where to start." "Start by getting answers," Greg said firmly. "Don't let this fester. Find out the truth, whatever it is." Greg's words stayed with David. That night, he decided to act. While Olivia was in the shower, David picked up her phone, his hands shaking slightly as he unlocked it. He knew her passcode, she had never hidden it from him, but the act of snooping felt like a betrayal of its own. Her recent messages were clean, filled with mundane exchanges with friends and family. But as he scrolled further, David noticed something odd, a separate messaging app, tucked away in a folder labeled Utilities. When he opened it, his stomach dropped. The app contained a single active conversation with a contact saved under the name M. The messages were flirtatious, filled with inside jokes and casual mentions of meetups. One message, sent just 2 days earlier, read, "Last night was perfect. Can't wait to see you again." David's breath caught in his throat. His heart pounded as he read the messages over and over, looking for some alternative explanation. But there was none. The pieces were falling into place, and they painted a picture David didn't want to see. David spent the next few days in a haze, his focus on the field wavering as his suspicions consumed him. He couldn't shake the messages he had read on Olivia's phone. Who was them? How long had this been going on? He knew he needed concrete proof before confronting her. Without it, she could easily deny everything, and he couldn't afford to let her wiggle out of this with excuses. David decided to call Greg for advice. They met at a quiet coffee shop early one morning before practice. "You were right, Coach," David admitted, his voice low. "Something's going on. I found messages on her phone. She's meeting someone, some guy. But I don't know who he is or how far it's gone." Greg nodded gravely. "I'm sorry to hear that, David. I know how much your family means to you. What do I do?" David asked, his frustration evident. "You need to get the full picture," Greg said. "Hire a professional, someone who can dig into her movements without tipping her off. If she's cheating, you need to know exactly what you're dealing with." The next day, David hired a private investigator named Lauren, who specialized in discreet marital investigations. He handed over everything he had, the receipt, the messages, and details about Olivia's recent behavior. Lauren assured him she would get to the bottom of it. "If there's something to find, I'll find it," she said confidently. Over the next week, Lauren kept David updated. She tracked Olivia's movements and captured photos of her activities. The evidence began piling up. Olivia frequently visited a luxury hotel downtown during the afternoons, often staying for several hours. A man, mid-30s, fit, and sharply dressed, was seen entering the hotel with her on multiple occasions. Phone records revealed frequent calls and texts to an unsaved number, which Lauren traced back to the man, Mark Ellison, a personal trainer at a high-end gym Olivia had joined 6 months earlier. The final nail in the coffin came when Lauren delivered photographs of Olivia and Mark sharing an intimate moment in the hotel lobby. They weren't just friends or acquaintances. The way they looked at each other, the way their bodies leaned in, it was unmistakable. Armed with undeniable proof, David prepared to confront Olivia. He wanted answers, but more than that, he wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done. One evening, after Ella had gone to bed, David sat Olivia down in the living room. His demeanor was calm, but his eyes burned with intensity. "We need to talk," he said. Olivia looked up from her phone, her expression curious but wary. "Okay. What's going on?" David pulled out the envelope containing the photos and records Lauren had compiled. He tossed it onto the coffee table. "Why don't you start by explaining this?" Olivia hesitated, her face paling as she opened the envelope. The color drained from her cheeks as she flipped through the photos, her hands trembling. "David, Don't," he interrupted, his voice sharp. "Don't insult me with excuses. I know everything, Olivia. The texts, the hotel, the afternoons with your trainer. How long has this been going on?" Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, and she shook her head. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she whispered. "I didn't mean for it to happen." "Then why did it?" David's voice cracked with anger. "We had a good life, Olivia. A family. And you threw it away for, what? Some guy from the gym?" Olivia buried her face in her hands, sobbing. "I was lonely, David. You're always traveling, always focused on football. I felt invisible, like I didn't matter anymore." David stared at her, his heart breaking even as his anger boiled. "And you thought cheating on me would fix that? Do you have any idea what you've done to me? To Ella?" "I'm so sorry," Olivia whispered, her voice choked with sobs. "Please, David, let me make this right. I'll end it. I'll do whatever it takes. But David shook his head, his expression cold. It's too late, Olivia. This marriage is over. The revenge plan. David wasn't content with just walking away. He wanted Olivia to face real consequences for her actions. Over the next few days, he worked with his legal team to file for divorce, citing infidelity as the cause. The evidence Lauren had gathered made his case airtight. Custody and financial control. David's first priority was Ella. He filed for full custody, arguing that Olivia's actions demonstrated a lack of judgment and stability. His lawyers ensured that the prenuptial agreement they had signed before marriage protected his assets, leaving Olivia with little financial leverage. Public exposure. David knew the public idolized him, and he wasn't afraid to use that to his advantage. While he didn't directly air their dirty laundry, he allowed just enough information to leak through trusted channels. Within days, gossip columns were buzzing with rumors of Olivia's affair. Her social media accounts were flooded with judgmental comments, and her once pristine image was shattered. Mark's career. Mark Ellison didn't escape David's wrath. Using his connections, David ensured Mark's affair with a married client became public knowledge. The gym, eager to distance itself from the scandal, fired Mark immediately. His reputation was ruined, and future opportunities in the fitness industry dried up. The fallout from David's actions was swift and devastating for Olivia. The life she had taken for granted, her marriage, her family, her reputation, crumbled around her, leaving her isolated and broken. Custody battle. David's legal team left no stone unturned. Armed with evidence of Olivia's affair, they painted a compelling case that her actions demonstrated poor judgment and instability, making her unfit for full custody of Ella. In court, Olivia pleaded for shared custody, tears streaming down her face as she described her bond with her daughter. But the judge sided with David, granting him full custody. Olivia was given visitation rights but under strict conditions. When Ella returned from her first supervised visit with Olivia, she clung to David. "Why doesn't Mommy live with us anymore?" she asked, her small voice tinged with confusion. David knelt down, holding her close. "Mommy made some choices that hurt our family," he explained gently. "But I'll always be here for you, no matter what." Ella nodded, her trust in David unshaken. Olivia, however, was left devastated by the growing distance between her and her daughter. Social and financial ruin. The public exposure of Olivia's affair made her a pariah in their social circles. Friends she once considered close began to distance themselves, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. Invitations to events dried up, and her previously active social media accounts became a battleground for judgment and ridicule. Financially, Olivia was left with little to rebuild her life. The prenuptial agreement ensured that David's wealth and assets remained untouched, leaving her to rely on a modest settlement. The lavish lifestyle she had enjoyed for years was gone, replaced by a small apartment and part-time work as a yoga instructor. Mark's downfall. Mark Ellison faced his own consequences. The gym that employed him terminated his contract after the scandal, and word quickly spread in the fitness community. Clients canceled their memberships, and future opportunities vanished. With his professional life in ruins, Mark attempted to contact Olivia, but she refused to take his calls. The affair that had once seemed thrilling had left them both in tatters. Months later, Olivia hit rock bottom. The once confident, poised woman was now a shadow of herself, thin, tired, and weighed down by regret. She spent countless nights replaying her decisions, wondering how she had thrown everything away for fleeting excitement. In a moment of desperation, Olivia reached out to David. She sent him a message, asking to meet and talk. David was hesitant but agreed, meeting her at a quiet cafe outside of town. When she arrived, she looked nervous and unsure, her hands fidgeting with the strap of her bag. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, her voice trembling. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to understand how sorry I am. Losing you and Ella, it's destroyed me. David's expression remained unreadable as he listened. I was selfish, Olivia continued. I didn't think about what I was risking. And now, I'm paying for it every single day. Please, David, is there any way we can fix this? David leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. You're right, you don't deserve my forgiveness. You didn't just hurt me, Olivia. You hurt Ella. You broke our family. Tears streamed down Olivia's face as David's words sank in. I've moved on, David said firmly. Ella and I are doing fine without you. I hope you find a way to move forward, but I can't let you back into our lives. He stood, leaving Olivia at the table, her sobs quiet but relentless. David's focus shifted to rebuilding his life. He poured himself into his career, his bond with Ella, and his personal growth. The experience, though painful, had taught him resilience and the importance of protecting what truly mattered. Over time, David began dating again, taking things slow and prioritizing his daughter's well-being. He found solace in the love and support of his teammates, friends, and fans who admired his strength and integrity. Olivia's life became a cautionary tale in their community. Once admired for her charm and grace, she was now a symbol of the devastating consequences of betrayal. David, on the other hand, emerged stronger, using his story to inspire others. In interviews, he spoke candidly about overcoming personal challenges and staying focused on the people who mattered most. Life will knock you down, he said during a televised appearance. But it's how you get back up that defines you. For me, it's all about my daughter and being the best version of myself for her. A few years later. Time had a way of healing, though it didn't erase the scars entirely. 5 years after the events that upended David's life, he was in a much different place, stronger, wiser, and more at peace. David's new chapter. David had retired from professional football 2 years earlier, leaving the game on his own terms after an illustrious career. Retirement wasn't the end, though, it was a new beginning. He transitioned seamlessly into sports commentary and analysis, becoming a sought-after personality for major networks. His charisma and deep understanding of the game made him a fan favorite, and his name remained synonymous with excellence and integrity. Beyond his career, David had also found love again. After years of focusing on Ella and his personal growth, he met someone special, Grace, a pediatric nurse he'd been introduced to by mutual friends. Grace was kind, grounded, and compassionate, a stark contrast to the chaotic glamour of his past. Their relationship was built on trust and mutual respect, and she quickly bonded with Ella, who adored her. A year into their relationship, David proposed, and they were planning a small, intimate wedding surrounded by close friends and family. Ella's growth. Now 11 years old, Ella was thriving. Bright, curious, and resilient, she had grown into a confident young girl with a passion for painting and dance. David had worked hard to create a stable and loving environment for her, and it showed in her cheerful demeanor and strong sense of self. Her relationship with Olivia, however, remained strained. Ella visited her mother occasionally, but the bond they once shared had never fully recovered. Olivia's absence during critical years of Ella's childhood had left a void, one that Ella didn't seem inclined to fill. Olivia's struggles. Olivia's life had not rebounded in the way she had hoped. The consequences of her choices had been far-reaching, leaving her with a tarnished reputation and fractured relationships. She continued to work as a yoga instructor, scraping by in a modest apartment far from the home she had once shared with David and Ella. Though she tried to rebuild her social circle, many of her old friends had moved on, unwilling to forgive the betrayal that had rocked their community. Emotionally, Olivia struggled with guilt and regret. She often replayed the choices that led to her downfall, wondering how things might have been different if she had valued what she had instead of chasing fleeting thrills. Her relationship with Mark had been short-lived, the scandal surrounding their affair had destroyed whatever fantasy they had built together. In hindsight, Olivia realized that the affair had never been about Mark, it had been about her own insecurities and unhappiness. But that realization came too late. A chance encounter. One afternoon, David and Grace were at a local park with Ella, enjoying a rare moment of calm between their busy schedules. As they watched Ella twirl around with a group of friends, David felt a sense of pride and gratitude. "Look at her," Grace said, smiling. "She's so happy." "You've done an incredible job raising her, David." David squeezed her hand, his heart full. "We've done it together," he replied. As they walked toward a cafe near the park, David froze. Across the street, sitting alone on a bench, was Olivia. She looked different, older, worn, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She was watching the children in the park, her expression wistful. Grace noticed his hesitation. "Do you want to say something to her?" David thought for a moment before shaking his head. "No. There's nothing left to say." They walked on, leaving Olivia behind. For David, the moment was a reminder of how far he had come and how much he had to be grateful for. Years later, David would reflect on that chapter of his life with a sense of clarity. The pain and betrayal had shaped him, but they hadn't defined him. He had emerged stronger, creating a life built on authenticity and love. For Olivia, the years that followed were a harsh lesson in the cost of selfishness. She lived with the consequences of her actions every day, knowing that she had lost something irreplaceable. In the end, David's story became one of resilience, a testament to the power of perseverance and the strength it takes to rebuild after betrayal.